What if the dua you whisper in exhaustion is the very one Allah never ignores, heard in silence, delayed by decree, shaping relief you cannot see, yet guiding your heart through helpless nights toward unseen mercy and lasting faith? There are moments in life when the heart feels heavier than the body, when effort no longer guarantees results, and when the road ahead appears blurred by uncertainty. In such moments, a person does not question effort alone. They question timing, destiny, and whether their cries are being heard at all. This is where helplessness quietly settles, not with noise, but with exhaustion. The man at the center of this reflection lived a simple life shaped by responsibility. His days began before sunrise and ended long after the world grew silent. Every action carried intention, every step carried hope. Yet despite sincerity, doors remained closed. Rizq felt delayed. Stability felt distant. And answers, though sought with patience, seemed unanswered. He did not lack belief. He lacked clarity. Each night, he replayed his choices, wondering if he had misunderstood Allah's plan or misread his own path. His heart carried sabr, but his soul felt tired of waiting. Still, when the world offered no reassurance, he turned inward, toward prayer not as habit, but as survival. His dua was never loud. It was whispered in moments of solitude, shaped by sincerity rather than expectation. He asked not for miracles, but for ease. Not for wealth, but for direction. Not for control, but for contentment. And when the silence remained, he reminded himself that divine timing does not move by human impatience. Around him, life continued as usual, people working, laughing, planning futures with confidence. Yet within him, a quiet struggle unfolded. A test not of strength, but of trust. A test not of faith, but of endurance. Because sometimes, the greatest trial is believing that Allah hears you, even when nothing seems to change. This was not the beginning of reward. It was the beginning of surrender. The man lived on the edge of a small town where routine was predictable but outcomes were not. The streets looked the same every morning, yet his life felt suspended in repetition. Each day, he rose with intention, believing effort itself was an act of worship. He worked with honesty, avoided shortcuts, and measured his actions carefully, hoping they aligned with what pleased Allah. Still, progress moved slowly, almost painfully so. His work was modest, long hours, limited reward. Some days brought enough to manage necessities, other days brought only worry. He watched others advance, secure opportunities, build comfort. He did not envy them, but he questioned himself. Had he missed a sign? Had he delayed a decision too long? Or was this simply his portion of takdir, unfolding beyond his understanding? At home, silence carried weight. The walls held unanswered questions. Responsibilities pressed inward, reminding him that faith did not remove duty. He felt accountable not only to himself, but to those who relied on him. And so, he carried on, even when motivation thinned and uncertainty grew louder. In the quiet hours before dawn, his thoughts grew heavier. Sleep came lightly, interrupted by reflection. He found himself revisiting moments when he had chosen integrity over convenience, patience over impulse. He wondered if those choices mattered. The world often rewarded speed, not sincerity. Yet he had been taught that rizq did not arrive through compromise, but through trust. And so, he turned repeatedly to dua, not as a ritual, but as refuge. He spoke to Allah without formality, without rehearsed words. He admitted fear. He admitted exhaustion. He admitted confusion. He asked not for a sudden change, but for strength to endure what had not yet changed. He asked for clarity, even if clarity meant accepting delay. And when the nights passed without visible response, he reminded himself that silence was not rejection. Still, the weight remained. There were days when patience felt fragile. when optimism felt forced, when faith felt quiet rather than strong. On those days, he questioned whether perseverance itself could become a burden. He feared mistaking endurance for stagnation. He feared waiting when action was required. Yet every time he considered abandoning his principles, something within him resisted. He remembered lessons passed down through years of observation rather than instruction, that what is meant will arrive, that what is delayed carries purpose. That which is withheld may be protecting the heart from harm it cannot yet see. These reminders did not erase hardship, but they softened its edge. As months passed, circumstances tightened. Opportunities appeared briefly, then dissolved. Promises were made, then forgotten. Each disappointment felt personal, though he knew it was not. He felt tested not in belief, but in consistency, whether he would remain sincere when results did not follow effort. In moments of solitude, he reflected deeply on decree. He understood it in theory, but living within it was different. Accepting that outcomes are written did not absolve him from striving. It demanded balance. To work fully while trusting completely. To plan responsibly while surrendering expectation. This balance, he realized, was where many hearts grew weary. He observed his own reactions carefully. When frustration surfaced, he countered it with remembrance. When resentment threatened his calm, he redirected it into prayer. He was not perfect. Doubt visited often, but it never stayed unchallenged. He refused to let hardship turn into bitterness. Around him, signs appeared quietly. Small moments of ease. Unexpected kindness. Brief openings that reminded him he was not abandoned. These moments did not solve everything, but they sustained him. They reminded him that mercy often arrives subtly, not dramatically. Still, the central struggle remained unresolved. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, he sat alone as the sky darkened. The air was still. His heart felt heavy, yet calm. He realized something then, not as a revelation, but as an acceptance. He had been measuring his journey by outcomes rather than growth. He had been asking when relief would come, rather than who he was becoming while waiting. This realization did not remove his challenges, but it reframed them. He saw how waiting had refined his character, how uncertainty had deepened his sincerity, how delay had strengthened his reliance on Rabb rather than on people. He recognized that had ease arrived earlier, he might never have developed this level of trust. That night, his dua changed slightly. Not in content, but in tone. There was less urgency, more surrender. Less demand, more humility. He asked Allah to grant him what was best, even if it differed from what he desired. He asked for acceptance before answers. He asked for peace before provision. And in that quiet moment, something within him softened. Nothing changed immediately. The world remained the same. His situation did not shift overnight. But his heart felt lighter, as if a burden had been acknowledged, even if not yet lifted. He did not know it then, but this internal shift marked the true beginning of change. Because sometimes, before Allah changes circumstances, He changes the turning point did not arrive with sudden light or dramatic signs. It arrived quietly, disguised as another test layered upon many before it. The man had learned by now that life rarely announces its most important moments. They reveal themselves only to those who remain attentive through fatigue. It began with loss, not catastrophic, but destabilizing. A source of income he relied upon was withdrawn without warning. No explanation. No transition period. Just absence. The news reached him in the middle of an ordinary day, making the ordinary feel fragile. In that moment, helplessness returned with force, heavier than before. For a brief instant, his chest tightened. Not with anger, but with fear. Responsibilities did not pause. Needs did not reduce. And solutions did not appear. He sat with the weight of it, feeling the familiar urge to question timing. He had just begun to feel inner calm, and now this. Yet something was different. He did not panic. He did not rush to complain. Instead, he felt an unfamiliar stillness settle within him, a restraint shaped by months of reflection. He recognized this moment not merely as hardship, but as examination, not of faith's presence, but of its depth. That night, his dua was longer than usual, not because of desperation, but because of honesty. He spoke to Allah with clarity. He admitted fear openly. He admitted that while he trusted decree, his heart still trembled. He asked for protection from despair more than protection from poverty. He asked for guidance that would not compromise his integrity. And he asked quietly that if relief was delayed, his heart not be allowed to harden. Days followed, each carrying uncertainty. He searched for alternatives, explored options, made calls, followed leads. Some led nowhere. Others offered compromise. He noticed how easily shortcuts presented themselves when pressure increased. Paths that promised speed at the cost of principles. Opportunities that blurred ethical lines. Each one tested him anew. This was the true climax, not the loss itself, but the choices it forced into view. He realized that his dua was being answered not with ease, but with decision. Not with provision yet, but with opportunity to remain sincere under pressure. And this frightened him more than delay ever had. Because it was easier to trust Allah when nothing was asked of him beyond patience. It was harder when trust required sacrifice. One evening, exhausted by options that conflicted with his values, he sat alone again. He felt the familiar pull toward resentment. Why now, when he had finally learned to surrender? But before it could take hold, he paused. He remembered something fundamental. Faith is not proven during comfort, but during conflict. He reflected deeply on rizq, how it is written, how it cannot be taken by others nor delayed by circumstance beyond what is intended. He reminded himself that provision earned through compromise may satisfy the body but wounds the soul. And a wounded soul, he knew, carries consequences far heavier than financial lack. And so, he declined what felt wrong, even when it felt risky. The next days were among the hardest. Resources thinned. Sleep was light. The mind worked constantly, calculating, worrying, restraining itself from spiraling. Yet within this tension, he noticed something profound. He was no longer asking, "Why me?" He was asking, "What does this moment require of me?" This shift mattered. He began to recognize subtle signs. Not solutions, but reassurances. A message from an old contact he had not spoken to in years. A small task offered unexpectedly. A reminder that his efforts, though unseen, were not wasted. None of these solved everything, but together they formed a pattern, one of gradual alignment rather than sudden rescue. Then came the moment of clarity. It arrived during a conversation he did not initiate and did not expect. An opportunity was mentioned, not guaranteed, not glamorous, but honest. It aligned with his skills, his values, his pace. It did not promise instant relief, but it offered stability with dignity. The terms were fair, the expectations reasonable, the timing uncertain, but hopeful. He felt something he had not felt in a long time, recognition. Not from people, but from his own heart. This path felt right, not because it was easy, but because it was clean. As he pursued it, obstacles still appeared. Delays, paperwork, silence. Old anxiety tried to resurface, but he met it differently now. Instead of panic, he returned to prayer. Instead of fear, he returned to patience. Instead of control, he returned to trust. Weeks passed. Then, quietly, confirmation came. The opportunity became real. Not sudden wealth, not dramatic success, but steady, sufficient, dignified provision. Enough to breathe. Enough to stand. Enough to move forward without shame or compromise. In that moment, he did not celebrate outwardly. He sat in stillness. Gratitude washed over him slowly, deeply. He understood then what he could not have understood earlier, that if this had arrived before his heart had matured, he might not have recognized its value. He saw the full picture, not all at once, but clearly enough. The loss that triggered fear had redirected him. The delay that caused pain had refined him. The unanswered nights had prepared him to receive with humility rather than entitlement. He realized that Allah had not been absent during his waiting. He had been shaping, aligning, protecting. And for the first time, the man understood that the dua he thought was ignored had been answered all along, just not in the way he expected. Because the greatest relief did not arrive when circumstances changed. It arrived when trust became stronger than fear. And that was the moment everything truly shifted. Relief did not rush in like a wave. It settled gently, like calm after a long storm. The man's life did not transform overnight, but its direction became clear. Stability returned gradually, not as excess, but as sufficiency. Needs were met. Worry loosened its grip. And for the first time in a long while, he could breathe without his chest feeling tight. What changed most was not his circumstance, but his perception. He noticed how his heart responded differently to ease. Gratitude came naturally without fear of losing it. He no longer measured success by comparison or speed, but by peace. Each step forward felt grounded, purposeful. He worked with renewed sincerity, aware that what he now held had arrived without compromise, and that alone gave it value. He reflected often on the path that brought him here, on the nights of uncertainty, on the choices that tested his resolve, on the offers he declined, the patience he struggled to maintain, the dua that felt unanswered. In hindsight, every delay carried instruction. Every hardship had filtered something out of him. Fear, ego, impatience, leaving behind clarity. He understood now that mercy does not always look like rescue. Sometimes it looks like restraint, protection from paths that glitter but corrode the soul, guidance away from outcomes that would have distracted him from what truly mattered. Allah had withheld not to punish, but to preserve. As his life found rhythm again, he became more attentive to others. He recognized familiar exhaustion in those around him, the quiet desperation masked by routine, the tired faith holding on without reassurance. He did not offer grand advice. He offered presence, understanding, gentle reminders that waiting does not mean abandonment. His own relationship with prayer deepened. Dua was no longer driven by urgency alone, but by connection. He spoke with trust rather than desperation, with humility rather than expectation. He no longer demanded timelines from Rabb. He asked for alignment, for acceptance, for the strength to remain steady regardless of outcome. He realized something essential. True contentment is not found when everything goes right. It is found when the heart learns to trust even when it does not. The future still held uncertainty. Challenges would return. He knew this. But fear no longer ruled his anticipation. He had witnessed, firsthand, how decree unfolds with precision beyond human sight. How rizq arrives exactly when the soul is ready to carry it. How patience refines intention and purifies desire. And so, the man moved forward, not with certainty of outcome, but with certainty of trust. He no longer questioned whether Allah heard him. He knew, because the greatest sign of answered prayer was not what he received, but who he became while waiting. And that understanding stayed with him, quietly guiding every step that followed. Sometimes, the most powerful duas are not answered with speed, but with transformation. When relief delays, it is not always denial. Often, it is preparation. Allah does not ignore the sincere heart. He refines it. He strengthens it. He aligns it with what it truly needs before granting what it desires. We learn that faith is not proven when life is easy, but when it is uncertain. Patience is not passive waiting. It is active trust. Rizq is not missed because of delay, nor stolen by others. What is written will arrive, and what is withheld may be shielding us from harm we cannot yet see. Decree unfolds with perfect timing, even when it feels painfully slow. So when your dua feels unanswered, remember this: silence is not absence. Delay is not rejection. Mercy often arrives quietly, shaping your heart before changing your situation. And when the time is right, what comes will not only meet your needs, it will preserve your peace. Let us end with a humble dua. Ya Allah, you see what we carry and what we hide. You hear the prayers we whisper when words fail us. Grant us patience when waiting feels heavy, and trust when answers feel distant. If you delay, give us strength. If you withhold, give us understanding. And when you give, grant us contentment and gratitude. Ya Rab, never let our hearts doubt your wisdom. Accept our duas, even the ones we struggle to believe in ourselves. Guide us gently through every test and make our reliance on you complete. Amin.